Bubba Wallace is expected to return to 2311 racing in 2025, and Shane Gisbergen is very likely to join the Cup Series in a third trackhouse seat in 2025. What's going, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to our video. We got some NASCAR and other motorsports stories discussed today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into those really quickly. We're first going to take a look at a couple paint schemes that have been revealed over the course of the last couple days. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into them. The first paint scheme we're taking a look at is Kyle C's 2024 U.S. Hydration Scheme that you'll see tomorrow afternoon in the Xfinity Series race at Pocono. It looks pretty good in my opinion. Love the colors of it. Definitely looking forward to on the racetrack tomorrow afternoon at Pocono. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Brandon Jones' 2024 Cheez-It scheme that we'll see at Pocono. I absolutely love this paint scheme, and it's really cool and exciting to see that Cheez-It is coming back to work with Brandon Jones. Really also glad to see that they're working with Junior Motorsports once again as well. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Jeb Burton's 2024 per year tribute scheme that we're going to see this weekend at Pocono. I like this a lot. The colors look pretty solid. They look fantastic. It's a really nice looking helicopter tribute scheme. Looking forward to see on the racetrack later this weekend at Pocono. And the final paint scheme we're taking a look at is Michael McDowell's 2024 gunk scheme that we'll see at Pocono. I like this a lot. Love the colors. I love the orange. I like the blue. I think they did an excellent and great job on the scheme, and I'm definitely looking forward to seeing on the racetrack this weekend at Pocono. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Pocono purse money. Every time we have a NASCAR Cup, Xfinity Series, and truck race, Bob Pockers puts out the purse money for the event. And according to Bob Pockers, for the Cup race is $7,776,907. For the Xfinity race is $1,439,558. And for the truck race is $757,128. That is not a lot of good money for the truck series, to be honest, but the Cup money is pretty good. Obviously, with the charter agreement, you tend to see a lot more money in Cup than you see in the truck series. It's decent money for Cup. It's okay money for Xfinity, but the truck series doesn't have great support, and obviously that's because of the fact that they don't get as much money because a lot of people don't show up to the events for trucks, and a lot of the purses have been down recently. Nonetheless, that's the purse money for this weekend at Pocono. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Jake Owen. As it was announced yesterday that Jake Owen will be performing a pre-race concert at Talladega Superspeedway in October. Jake Owen, who back in the day was one of the biggest country singers back in the mid-2000s to the mid to late 2010s, and early 2020s as well, has not been as popular in the last couple years, but Jake Owen still had some pretty big songs. It's really cool to see. We'll get the chance and opportunity to perform a pre-race concert at Talladega. I think he'll do a very solid, and I think he'll do a pretty good job later this year at Talladega. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Thomas Annunziata. As it was reported by Joseph Strigley from TobyChristie.com that Thomas Annunziata will drive the 4 for JD Motorsports this weekend at Pocono. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, this will be his third career or second career NASCAR Xfinity start. He did attempt to run Chicago, but unfortunately failed to qualify for that event. This also will be his first NASCAR Xfinity Series start on an oval as well. Thomas has raced a lot in ARCA, had a couple chances to win earlier this year, and I think Thomas is going to have a solid chance and opportunity to make the field in the show. JD Motorsports also announced earlier today their withdrawal on the 6th car, so they only have one car attempt, which I think this is the first time for them in a long time to see that. Really glad to see that Thomas will be behind the wheel of this car this weekend at Pocono. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Stephen Malazzi. As it was announced yesterday, Stephen Malazzi will be doing double duty this weekend at Pocono. He'll be driving the 27 for Raymond Brothers Racing later tonight in the Truck Series race, and he'll drive the number 35 for Joey Gase Motorsports on Saturday afternoon. Steve Malazzi, the driver, has been working on stuff. He did make some select starts last year for the Raymond Brothers Racing organization. I think, if I'm not mistaken, this is going to be the first time that we are going to see Steve Malazzi racing in the NASCAR Xfinity Series and Truck Series this year. I've been wondering if he's ever going to get the chance and opportunity to get back behind the wheel, and I'm glad to see we will see him this weekend at Pocono. I hope he can do well. There's no one going home this weekend, so hopefully Steve Malazzi can do a really solid and good job this weekend at Pocono. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Eric Jones. Now, Eric Jones competed in the race, the late model race at Jennerstown Speedway, and was able to pick up the victory lane, making some late passes on drivers like Bubba Pollard, I believe. Congratulations to Eric Jones on picking up the win at Jennerstown Speedway. Obviously, he's had a kind of a struggling year in the NASCAR Cup Series, so it's really good to see him go out and run a late model race and was able to be super competitive. It's really great to see this for him. It's going to build some confidence for this weekend at Pocono. Once again, like I said, congratulations to Eric Jones on picking up the win at Jennerstown Speedway in Pennsylvania. Congratulations to him on the win. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Shane Van Gisbergen. As it was reported by Colleague Racing in their Twitter account that Shane Van Gisbergen has now led in 5 of his first 6 Cup starts. This is the first time in Cup Series history that a driver has led in 5 of their first 6 starts. To be honest, it's super impressive. SVG, of course, led 9 laps at Chicago Street Course, which I believe is the second most laps, maybe the third most laps, of any driver that led in that event. And I certainly think he could have definitely led the most of the laps had he not been crashed out early at Chicago. It's a massive accomplishment for SVG, though. He continues to do really impressive things, especially with a lot of talk of him moving up the Cup next year. Once again, congratulations to him on breaking a record. It's a really huge deal, and I'm very happy and glad to see that he was able to break that record. Congratulations to Shane Van Gisbergen on picking up a major accomplishment on leading 5 of his first 6 Cup starts. Really exciting stuff overall, to be honest with you. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Josh Bilicki. As it was announced earlier today that Josh Bilicki will be driving the 92 for DGM Racing this weekend at Pocono. Originally, the rumor speculation that Stephanie Moyer was going to be getting behind the wheel of his car and she was going to be making her NASCAR Xfinity Series debut, but Josh Bilicki's been the old reliable to drive for DGM Racing a lot, will be the driver this weekend. Josh has made select starts at DGM, but of course also has made select starts with Joe Gibbs Racing as well. I don't expect Josh to be a major contender for the win. I think he will contend maybe for like a top 5, or not top 5, but maybe like a top 20 perhaps. They've had that kind of pace and speed this year, but like I said, I don't expect him to set the world on fire, but I'm glad to see that Josh Bilicki is going to be back in the NASCAR Xfinity Series more this year. He's done a very solid and good job, and like I said, congratulations to getting the chance and opportunity to drive for DGM Racing once again. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the F1 sprint races. As the 2025 schedule for the F1 sprint races has been officially unveiled. The first sprint race is going to take place in China. The next one will take place at the Miami Grand Prix weekend. Then they'll have the next one at Spa for the Belgium weekend. Then they'll do another one at Circuit of the Americas. Then they'll do one at Sao Paulo in Brazil. And the final one is going to be, I believe, at the season finale at Qatar. A couple interesting tracks to go at for sure for it. I think Sao Paulo will be pretty good. So usually the racing for F1 can be good at that track. I think China's not going to be great, to be honest. And Miami certainly is a track that I'm not a big fan of. I know Lando Norris got his first F1 win this year, but I still don't think that that's a great track for the racing itself. I'm glad to see that they're doing the sprint races again. I wish they would change the format up for a little bit. I'm glad they do award half points for that event. I think it's cool. But overall, I do think when you have the sprint qualifying, you need to change the format for the weekend because I think it does affect my enjoyment of some of these races, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Sage Karam. As it was announced earlier today that Sage Karam will drive the 21 for Floridian Motorsports later today at Pocono International Speedway. Sage Karam has made select starts so far this year in the NASCAR Xfinity Series, and also I believe this will be his first truck start of 2024. Sage has been driving a 26 car. I think he's driven for MBM at points, and I do think this, and also I think he's driven for Alpha Primus here too, if I'm not mistaken. Sage has done a solid job in the NASCAR Xfinity Series in those select races. I don't think he's going to set the world on fire. This truck obviously won't have to worry about making the shows. It's a full field for the weekend. I think that Sage has got a decent chance for a decent run. I've seen this car with Mason Maggio contend for a top 25, and no disrespect to Mason Maggio, but I think that Sage Karam is a better driver. So I think this truck does have a chance for a top 20. I think he'll do a very solid job, and glad to see that Sage Karam will once again be driving for Floridian Motorsports this weekend at Pocono. Looking forward to seeing him get the chance and opportunity. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Hy-Vee. As it was announced earlier today that Hy-Vee and IndyCar in Iowa have struck a multi-year deal with Hy-Vee going forward. Hy-Vee, of course, has been working with IndyCar in a major way over the course of the last couple of years, really since Hy-Vee got involved back in 2018 and 2019, and they're a major reason why Iowa Speedway was able to get back on the IndyCar schedule. There were rumors, speculation about Hy-Vee potentially leaving because of their involvement with NASCAR. We do know that Hy-Vee's in major talks and conversations to potentially be going over to McLaren next year with Christian Lundgaard, who's got a big association with the sponsorship. This is really exciting stuff, though, to see Hy-Vee sticking around once again. I think it's really huge for the sponsorship. I think it's really amazing and great for the branding, and nonetheless, really happy and glad to see that IndyCar and Iowa have reached an agreement and a deal with Hy-Vee. I think it's really excellent and really amazing to see overall, to be perfectly honest with you. And now we're going ahead to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Johnny Sauter. As it was reported by Austin Ensky from the Motorsports Wire, and this is on the roster portal according to them, that Johnny Sauter is going to be driving the 16th for Tory Racing next week at Indianapolis Raceway Park. Johnny Sauter has only made, I believe, 2 or 3 starts so far in the Truck Series this year, all coming with Nice Motorsports. He arguably had the fastest truck at Daytona International Speedway and has been okay in a few races that he has ran so far. I think Johnny's going to be in a decent position, but Tory Racing obviously is going to be in a difficult position because they're going to have to qualify their way in, because remember, they've only made 1 start so far this year. That coming when Eric Almirola got behind the wheel, or he tried to get behind the wheel. I think he unfortunately had to fail to qualify for the race, sadly. I do think that Johnny Sauter will have a decent performance. If he does make the show, he's been good at IRP in the past in the Truck Series, so I do think that Johnny Sauter could be somewhat competitive. I think it's a great opportunity for Johnny Sauter. I'm really happy for him, and nonetheless, it's amazing and cool to see that a former truck champion will be back racing in the Truck Series with the Tory Racing at IRP. Really great and amazing stuff overall, to be honest with you. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about the Mid-Ohio TV ratings. As it was reported by Nathan Brown by the Indy Star, the IndyCar averaged 1.31 million viewers on NBC for the first race of the hybrid era. According to Nathan Brown, that is the most watched non-Indy 500 broadcast for IndyCar since St. Petersburg in 2022. That is a really good number, all things considered, for IndyCar. Generally, their numbers have been down throughout the year. They're generally in that 800,000, that 1 million range. And for the Indy 500 this year, they were at about 5.5 million. So to see this number as good as it is, I think is really awesome to see, because I think we want the series to succeed and IndyCar to grow. And that's hope with Fox coming in. That's the hope, is that they can put on a really good product on TV especially. And to see almost 1.5 million people tuning in, of course a lot of people were tuning in to see the first hybrid race, but they're also tuning in because they were waiting for the NASCAR Cup race at Chicago to get going. Maybe they need to have IndyCar before NASCAR going forward, because that's what they used to do back in the day or a few years ago, and I'm hoping that with Fox, though, we know that Fox is going to be extremely committed to IndyCar, and a lot of the NASCAR Cup races are going to be going on FS1 in 2025. Nonetheless, though, this is really, really exciting to see for sure the ratings be up. I'm really happy about this for the series, and congratulations to the IndyCar on having a huge ratings TV win for IndyCar. Really exciting stuff overall, to be honest with you. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Nitrocross. As yesterday, Nitrocross revealed the track for the first Nitrocross race at Richmond Raceway. Remember, I believe Nitrocross is going to be coming for the first time, maybe ever, if I'm not mistaken, and it'll be taking place on the September 7th to 9th weekend. The track looks very interesting. You're going to be using turn 4, looks like, a little bit, and they're going to be using the infield, and there's going to be a little bit of an inner road course that they're going to be using as well. Really cool stuff for sure. Obviously, there's a lot of talk that Thrill 1 is going to be hugely involved with this. Well, Thrill 1, of course, owns Nitrocross, but Thrill 1's going to be having help from NASCAR. Obviously, that electric vehicle that got revealed over the weekend. There's a lot of talk that Dana White's working on a deal to get that done as we speak, and we do expect that announcement is probably coming in the not-so-distant future. So this is really, really exciting to see. I think it's really great for sure. And just awesome and amazing to see that Richmond is going to be putting on an event. I thought they would be doing during the Richmond Cup weekend, but I still think it's really exciting nonetheless, and glad to see that Nitrocross has their event revealed, and really cool that they're going to be racing in Richmond here in the not-so-distant future. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Logan Sargent. As it was reported by Adam Stern earlier today, that Logan Sargent could be either racing in IndyCar in 2025 or racing in sports cars in 2025. A lot of people have been linking Logan Sargent to leave Formula One at the end of this season and looks to be coming over to IndyCar to drive for Prema. And according to what Renee Rast, who I think owns the organization, or Ray Rosen, who owns the Prema organization, who's the president of the group, he has said they have had conversations with him. Apparently, there are 2 IndyCar teams that have had conversations, and Prema is one of them. They're looking to go very, very young. Logan Sargent has been struggling heavily in Formula One this year, and many people do expect that he is going to leave Formula One altogether, as rumors spiral that Carlos Sainz could potentially be taking over Logan Sargent's seat going into 2025. I think Logan Sargent is going to be welcomed with open arms if he comes over to IndyCar, because I think he's very talented. I don't know if he's extremely talented, but he's had some standout performances at times in Formula One, and I think we've seen sometimes these drivers in Formula One come over to IndyCar, and they do exceptionally well. Look at Marcus Ericsson, for example. He went over the Arrow McLaren for a little bit, and then, of course, he went over to Chip Ganassi. He was a championship contender for a few years and won a couple races in IndyCar as well, and he's done solid with Andretti in the second half of the year. I would really love to see Logan come into IndyCar and see what it can do, especially with Prema. I think working with Prema, which I think he drove for not Indy next, but Formula 2, I think he did a really excellent job there. So I really hope it ends up happening where we do see Logan Sargent come away from Formula One and come over to NASCAR. I think he'd be very solid. Not NASCAR, IndyCar. I think he'd be very solid. I think he'd be very successful. And I really hope we do get to see Logan Sargent come to the U.S. and race in some big leagues. Hope it does end up happening, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Connor Daly. As it was announced on Wednesday morning on his Street Sport podcast that Connor Daly will be driving the 26 for Sam Hunt Racing next weekend at Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Along with making 3 starts with Nice Motorsports, and he'll be driving a Truck Series race at Indianapolis Raceway Park, driving a 44-car truck. He will be driving the 26 for Sam Hunt, making, I believe, his first Xfinity Series start of 2024. Connor Daly has been super, super busy. Of course, he's got a big podcast in IndyCar, and of course, has ran a couple IndyCar races so far this year. Of course, he ran the Indy 500 and did have a pretty good run going at this year's Indy 500. So he's going to be doing double duty, and I think he's got a good chance and opportunity for a decent performance. I don't think he's going to go out there and contend for the win, but it's really cool to see a driver who's from this area get to race in Xfinity at this racetrack. I think he's going to do a very solid job. I think the performance is going to be there. I do think the speed will be there for them at Indianapolis, because we know the Sam Hunt racing cars, well, they're not contenders for wins on a week-by-week basis. We do know this car has a chance to run up front. So I'm really happy for Connor. I'm glad to see he's getting the chance and opportunity, and I think he will absolutely be able to make the best of it. My prediction for Connor is I think he easily makes the field, which his car is in a good position to owners' points, and I think that Connor Daly will at least potentially get a top 15 or top 20. I think he's going to do an excellent job, and it's cool to see he's running on an oval, and he's going to have a very busy weekend driving that 44 truck as well. I think Connor Daly will do a very solid and a really good job with Sam Hunt Racing next weekend at Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Glad to see he'll get a chance and opportunity to drive for that team. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Rhett Jones Racing. Now we're going to talk about Noah Gragson here in just a little bit, but the guys from Rhett Jones Racing, Terry Jones and Mark Rett, were spotted at the Noah Gragson press conference for him going to Front Row Motorsports. And according to what Matt Weaver reported, Rhett Jones Racing is looking to run more NASCAR Xfinity Series races potentially in 2024, and they could be looking to go full-time in 2025. Rhett Jones Racing has made 2 NASCAR Xfinity Series starts so far this year. They ran a Nashville a couple weeks ago where they finished, I believe, in the top 5 or 6, where Noah Gragson ran in the top 5 pretty much all day long. If I remember correctly, at Charlotte, which was their first start, they ran inside the top 10. I would love to see this team go full-time in 2025 and maybe either do like a rotation lineup or brings a driver in there full-time, maybe like a Haley Deegan perhaps, where she can get a little bit of experience and learn with Rhett Jones Racing, or find a way to contact Frankie Muniz and bring him in, or have a rotation of 4 drivers, like a Matt DiBenedetto, like a Noah Gragson, like a Todd Gilliland perhaps. Maybe bring drivers to that front row, maybe Sam Mayer, if Sam Mayer does in fact go to front row next year. That could certainly be a possibility and a shout for 2025. But I really would love to see this team be extremely successful if they are able to join full-time next year, which, it does sound like that they are looking to go full-time in the 2025 calendar year. And I think the more teams you have, the better. It's a more competitive series. Xfinity's gotten extremely competitive. You've got some of these teams in the middle of the pack that are getting better. And I think if you put Red Jones Racing full-time, I think they are going to be a really strong organization for next year. So again, I really hope this ends up happening. I want to see this happen where Red Jones Racing does get to run full-time next year, because I truly do believe that they will be very solid and pretty competitive. Will it happen? Who knows at this particular moment in point, but I do think there's a good chance and possibility that you will see Red Jones Racing full-time next year. And if they do end up going full-time, I think they're going to do a very solid and great job. Again, we'll have to wait and see what happens if they decide to go. If they run more races, they've got 2 more races scheduled. I think they're running in Michigan in a few weeks, and I think they're running around the playoffs with Noah Gragson as well. But there is a chance, like I said, that Red Jones Racing could potentially run full-time in the NASCAR Xfinity Series in 2025. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Richmond Raceway once again. As it was reported by Matt Weaver last night, that Richmond Raceway is confirmed that they will have multiple tire compounds that they're going to be running at Richmond in a couple of weeks. It's going to be very similar to tire compounds they use at North Wilkesboro. Remember, they had a primary tire, which is a tire that lasted a lot longer, and you had an option tire that basically was much quicker than that primary tire, but also wore out a lot quicker. Unfortunately, the tires that they ended up using really didn't work out, and I think a lot of that had to do with it being a new surface on the racetrack, but also with it being cooler temperatures and being a night as well. It did affect it. The one thing that could end up hurting this is I believe this also is going to be a night race, if I'm not mistaken. But what I do love is that NASCAR is going to be giving the teams the option tire, which is going to be available. Now, I don't know if NASCAR is going to be setting where the teams have to run a certain tires, maybe during the practice sessions, or if they're going to be requiring teams to start on there. Because if they don't require the teams to start on a certain set of tires, I think that is a really good move on NASCAR's end, because giving the teams the options available to try to put on a good short track race, that's what we want to see. It's no secret that the short track racing currently in the next gen era has just not been very good. And to see that they're going to be trying things with Goodyear, and I know that Goodyear should not be the only one looking at trying to fix the problems, because I don't think Goodyear is extremely the problem. I think the biggest problem with this car is the car itself. The next-gen car just does not race that well on road courses. We've known this for a long time, but I'm glad to see the NASCAR isn't sitting on their heads and they're trying to figure out a way to fix the problem, which the problem itself is this car inherently. They need more horsepower in the car, which NASCAR could do that if they bring the hybrid system in, which it does sound like they're maybe looking to bring a hybrid system in the future. But again, I want to see good racing. The short track racing hasn't been great, and Richmond is also rumored to be losing a date at the end of this year, because Mexico City or Montreal might end up picking up that date for 2025. So we're going to have to wait and see what happens on how it plays out. I think it will actually be a better race than what we've seen. I hope I'm proven right that we do see better racing. Sometimes I've been proven wrong and we don't get the best racing, but I do think there's a great chance that we are at least going to see a much better race than we've seen in recent years at a track like this. So again, I hope it ends up happening. I hope we get a great race. Well, let's hope that we do get some solid racing in Richmond, and then NASCAR can go from here and try to get the short track package a lot better. This hopefully will be a step in the right direction. The crew chiefs seem very happy. I do wish this was in a day race and this was not a night race, because I think we'd be in for a much better treat on this type of track. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Front Row Motorsports. Now we're going to talk about Noah Gragson here in just a little bit, getting announced at Front Row Motorsports. But Bob Pockers actually spoke to the owner of Front Row Motorsports, Bob Jenkins, I think over Zoom call. And Bob revealed some very interesting information regarding Front Row Motorsports. According to what he said, that being Bob Jenkins, Travis Peterson will very likely not be back to crew chief for Front Row Motorsports in 2025, as Travis Peterson is likely going to be joining Michael McDowell over at Spire Motorsports in 2025. I think Travis Peterson going over to Spire Motorsports makes a ton of sense. They are paying a lot of people. In fact, I think Michael McDowell said this on SiriusXM NASCAR Radio earlier today, that they're planning to make some pretty big executive changes over there, and they're also going to make some more big crew moves over there. We know Ronnie Childs, of course, is going over there, the crew chief for Corey LaJoie in 2025 with him being a KHI client. It does make quite a bit of sense. Another thing they talked about is car numbers. They did not announce what car number Noah Gragson is going to be running. There is some talk the numbers they're going to use is 34, 36, and 38, but they could maybe bring the 10 in. They could bring the 4 in. And we could see some new numbers coming in for Front Row Motorsports next year. They're probably going to announce that here in the not-so-distant future. The truck operation is also expected to relocate to a new shop. The current Cup shop is going to be staying intact. They're not planning to change that. They were looking to buy one of the SHR shops, but when it was confirmed the Haas factory team was going to be coming into play, that unfortunately went out the window. As for the car numbers that I think they're likely going to use, I think it's still going to be 34, 36, and 38. I think you're going to see maybe Sam Mayer, so whoever's going there next year, get the opportunity. And there's going to be more information coming out on Front Row. They did reveal at the press conference that they are very close to announcing the third and final driver at Front Row Motorsports, which I do truly believe that is going to be coming very soon. We'll see how this all kind of plays out in regards to Front Row Motorsports and what happens to the team and organization and what decisions they do go ahead and decide to make. But it sounds like Front Row Motorsports is getting super close to figuring that out. But there's some very interesting things. We don't know who's going to be in the truck next year. Maybe Brett Moffitt gets back behind the wheel of a Front Row truck next year because he was originally the driver who was the lead candidate. But I also think Lane Riggs, who I think has kind of struggled this year, might get a chance and opportunity to be with them once again. But I'm not blaming Lane Riggs for that. I think a lot of it is a rookie crew chief, but I also think that Lane's also had some good performances as well. So we'll see what ends up happening in regards to Front Row and whatever ends up happening, and hopefully things will play out for the Front Row organization going forward. But it sounds like they're making some big moves, and we should be knowing more stuff about Front Row here in the not-so-distant future. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Hailie Deegan. Now, we've talked about Hailie Deegan quite a bit on this channel over the course of the last couple days. Over the weekend, it was revealed, and basically kind of all started last week at the Chicago Street Course weekend. Hailie Deegan was replaced by Joey Logano at the Chicago Street Course. One of the biggest theories going around at that time was Hailie Deegan was only getting replaced for that weekend because they're trying to find a way to make the field because that number 15 car was not in a very good position at owner's points. But again, there began to be a ton of speculation that Hailie Deegan was going to be let go from AM Racing. And sure enough, it was announced on Monday morning around 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time that Hailie Deegan, in fact, would not be returning to AM Racing going forward, and she is still looking for opportunities going to the remainder of this year and also trying to maybe go full-time in 2025 with the competitive organization. Look, Hailie Deegan has completely struggled this year. There's no denying that. But it does sound like AIM Racing has had a ton of problems. I mean, Matt Lucas, who basically took over for Joe Williams, and Joe Williams, who, of course, is a former crew chief of AM Racing, he kind of called that out on Facebook, kind of said that the team, well, she's definitely part of the problem. It sounds like that basically she wasn't the only big issue over there. They fired Joe Williams, and that was a big frustrating point. And now the big question you ask is, what is the future for Hailie Deegan? Look, we all kind of saw this coming when Hailie Deegan was announced. There was talk that AM Racing was going to be a two-car organization in 2025, and Brett Moffitt was going to be that second driver, or Matt DiBenedetto was going to be the second driver. And obviously that did not end up happening where they put him in the car, which I think a veteran driver over at that organization would have really helped Hailie out. They were a sophomore organization. They did solid with Brett Moffitt last year, but Hailie Deegan should not have had that much pressure on her going into the year. I think a lot of it rolls down to inexperience for Hailie. I don't think that she was ready to move up. I think she got rushed up, but she also had been in trucks for 3 years. But let's be real and frank and honest, she really had not shown a lot of improvement. So what does Hailie Deegan do at this point? Where does her future lie? Well, there's a chance she could go back to the truck series. Maybe she goes to Front Row Motorsports and truck. She does bring funding with her. That could certainly be a possibility, but I don't know if that 38 truck is really looking for funding. You've also got Thorsport Racing. You could try to pick her up again, but Jake Garcia, I think, is under contract for next year, so I don't think that's going to happen. So then you got to look at the Xfinity Series and look at the Ford camp. We obviously know she's not going to AM Racing. Could she be a candidate for Haas Factory Team if Riley Hurt's rumored to be moving up the Cup? That could certainly be a possibility, but I think a lot of people will be questioning it because they don't think that she deserves another opportunity with a good team, which I don't completely agree with that. I would love to see her in a better ride with AM Racing provided. That being said, that ride got a top 10 with Joey Logano, but Joey Logano, of course, is a two-time champion. Maybe she goes to Rhett Jones Racing. I was kind of talking about it here just a little bit ago. Rhett Jones Racing, they are expected to potentially try to go full-time. Maybe they try to go and pick up her to run full-time. That would not be a bad move. She also brings some sponsors as well that I think would really help her grow. I want Hailie Deegan to succeed in this sport, and I think her doing well is really good for the sport. But seeing her struggle as much as she has been definitely very frustrating to watch. I don't think her career is over, as some are saying. I think she will find a way back in NASCAR. But if it's with a really competitive team, and she could leave Ford to go to like JGR perhaps in Xfinity, that could certainly be an option. I remember that was the initial plan for her to race in ARCA with JGR, if I remember correctly. So I don't know what you do at this point with Hailie Deegan, where she goes from here. I do think Hailie Deegan still deserves to be racing in NASCAR. I think she will find a way to stay in the sport because she is a big name. I don't think she leaves the sport anytime soon. I think Hailie Deegan absolutely will find a way to stay in NASCAR going into the foreseeable future. I think her future is definitely in question, but trust me, I think Hailie Deegan will still be in NASCAR for the foreseeable future. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Noah Gragson. Now, we talked about the story on the channel, but it was officially confirmed on Wednesday morning to early afternoon that Noah Gragson will officially join Front Row Motorsports in 2025. This is a multi-year deal, so this contract will go through 2025, and I also believe through 2026 and probably 2027 as well. Now, the number, the crew chief, and the sponsor are still to be announced at this moment, but there's been some sponsors that have been kind of talking about looking at it. We do know that Front Row Motorsports is expected to have a very young organization. Todd Gillen, of course, will be back with Front Row. We do think he'll be in the 30A car once again. And Todd Gillen has been doing a very solid job this year as he currently sits 20th in the playoff standings and 19th in the regular season standings. Noah Gragson has been linked to this ride. There was talk about Noah Gragson potentially going over to Richard Childress Racing for 2025, but we are expecting that RSR is going to remain 2 full-time cars for the 2024-25 season. Now, as for Noah Gragson going to Front Row, I think this is a really huge pickup, and having a multi-year deal he can learn because Noah Gragson has been bouncing around multiple organizations over the course of the last few years. You go back to, I think, 2022, Noah Gragson drove for Colleague Racing for a select number of races. He also drove, I think, for Beer Motorsports in a one-off or two. And he also, of course, drove for Hendrick Motorsports when Alex Bowman was injured back in 22 from those concussion issues that he had. Then in 2023, he drove for Legacy Motor Club, and it was a complete disaster for Noah. He got let go early for other reasons I'm not going to get into. And then this year, he went to Stewart Haas Racing. And coming into this year, I was not expecting Noah Gragson to really set the world on fire. And Noah Gragson, with all the circumstances behind the scenes, I think he's done a very excellent job with SHR this year. I think he's 23rd in the points right now, I believe. And if you added those 35 points, he'd be almost inside the top 20 in the regular season standings, which is super impressive. And I think Noah Gragson has only gotten better. And I think if you put Noah Gragson in this team, he's going to do an excellent job. I think he will be a playoff threat next year because I think he's going to end up in the 34 car. Despite them not announcing the car number for Noah, I think the number that Noah Gragson is going to end up using is the number 34 car next season. The 34 makes a lot of sense. Love's Travel Stop, they're expected to potentially stick around. There was talk maybe they'd be following Michael McDowell over to Spire Motorsports, but I think Love's Travel Stop is going to stick around. I also think Bass Pro Shops and Black Rifle Coffee, and I saw a tweet from yesterday that Horizon Hobby is also looking to sponsor Noah as well. So I don't think sponsorship is really going to be an issue for Noah Gragson. The big other question surrounding Noah Gragson is who is the crew chief going to be for Noah next year? Like I mentioned a little bit ago, Travis Peterson is expected to leave Front Row and go over to Spire Motorsports, the crew chief for Michael McDowell. I think that the crew chief is going to be Drew Blickensderfer. Drew Blickensderfer was actually a former crew chief of the 34 car when Michael McDowell, of course, drove that seat. They won the Daytona 500 together. And for a couple years, Drew Blickensderfer was showing a ton of improvement as a crew chief. I think Drew Blickensderfer, who's developed an amazing working relationship with Noah Gragson over the course of the last couple of years, or the last year, I should say, I think they're going to end up working together in 2025. As for Noah Gragson, I really like this move for him. I think this is a fantastic career move, and I think Noah Gragson is going to do a very solid job. The big question is who gets that third seat for next year. We'll probably talk about that here in just a second when we get to the silly season portion, but I do think that Noah Gragson has earned the opportunity to go to a team like Front Row. The redemption story is incredible for Noah. He's earned the opportunity, right? And I certainly do think that Noah Gragson is going to do a very phenomenal job, and I think he will be a playoff threat, especially with the Tier 1 support. It was confirmed, I believe, at the press conference that we know that Front Row is going to be continuing their Tier 1 support with Team Penske, and they're going to also be a Tier 1 organization next year with a very young group. But I think that Noah Gragson, he's likely going to be the oldest guy at the team next year, so I do think that Noah Gragson will be the leader of the organization, or Todd Gillen will probably be the leader, but I think that Noah Gragson should also be considered to potentially have some leadership qualities with the team going into 2025. So again, we're going to have to wait and see what happens in regards to what happens to Noah Gragson, how he's going to perform. But I do think that Noah Gragson is going to do a solid job. He's done a great job with Stuart Haas Racing this year, and I certainly do believe that Noah Gragson will, in fact, do a very solid and great job. And I'm glad to see that Noah Gragson does have a seat in the ride for 2025. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the first of two major stories in today's episode as we're talking about Bubba Wallace. As it was announced on Wednesday early morning that Bubba Wallace has been fined $50,000 for post-race contact with Alex Bowman at the conclusion of the Cup Series race at the Chicago Street Course. Alex Bowman, of course, went on to win his 8th career NASCAR Cup Series race at the Chicago Street Course. But early in the race, there was some controversy. On the restart, where the rain was really coming down very heavily at the start of stage number 2, Bubba Wallace got turned by Alex Bowman. I believe they're around the top 10 area in the race. And Bubba Wallace got turned by Alex Bowman going into turn number 3. And Daniel Suarez was collected in that. Bubba was not very happy, was able to recover and finish inside the top 15 in 13th place. After the race, Alex Bowman was going down to basically celebrate, and they were going down up, I think, into the final corner, and Bubba just gave him a really big hit and forced Alex Bowman into the outside wall, and Bubba expressed his frustration. NASCAR then, of course, handed the $50,000 fine, but, of course, Alex Bowman was defending Bubba in the situation. He felt really bad. He felt terrible for the incident and mistake on the racetrack, and he said that NASCAR should not have penalized him. Of course, like I mentioned a second ago, NASCAR then went ahead and penalized Bubba Wallace, even though Alex Bowman specifically said to not penalize Bubba. $50,000, I think, is completely egregious. But there's another reason why I think it's super egregious. So they penalized Bubba Wallace, right, for $50,000 because the crowd was really pushing for him to get the penalty. There was another incident that happened after the checker flag had happened. Chase Elliott got turned by Daniel Suarez coming to the checker flag of the race. Chase Elliott was running inside the top 20, and Suarez ruined Chase Elliott's top 20 streak. Chase Elliott, meanwhile, during the post-race when they were coming back to pit road, Chase Elliott also had a run-in with Daniel Suarez. Did NASCAR give Chase Elliott a fine at all? No. Chase Elliott received no fine, but according to what NASCAR told the media, they said they were planning to speak to Chase Elliott about the situation. I personally do not like the inconsistency. How are you going to penalize one driver $50,000? I'm glad it wasn't a points penalty because I would have been more frustrated if it was a points penalty. But how is it the fact that you give Bubba Wallace a $50,000 fine, but you give Chase Elliott nothing? And y'all can say, oh, past history, maybe what happened in New Hampshire really played a role in that, where Bubba Wallace was on pit road and ran the Noah Gragson. Maybe that's what it is. Maybe that's why they gave him, because of Bubba Wallace's post-race issues, where he's also turned Kyle Larson and right-reared him down the straightaway. You can say that, but Chase Elliott also has a little bit of history as well. Do y'all remember last year at the Coke 600 when Chase Elliott right-reared Denny Hamlin down the straightaway and Denny Hamlin hit the outside wall? Chase Elliott got a suspension for that. I just don't like the inconsistency. And if you want my personal and honest opinion, I think it's a load of horse crap that Bubba Wallace received the fine anyways. We've seen post-race contact many times before. Go back to earlier this year. Mark Truex Jr., after losing the Cup race at Richmond, he got no penalty after he went on a complete rampage. He ran into Kyle Larson, they both ran into each other, and bumped in the back of Denny Hamlin multiple different times. And I've seen people trying to compare this to the Carson Hocevar incident, which those incidents aren't even close. That was during the race, the Carson Hocevar incident. And Bubba Wallace got basically the same penalty, except the points, that Carson Hocevar got. I'm sorry, I think that's just absolutely ridiculous. And we've seen contact like this many, many times before. Kyle Busch and Carl Edwards, 2008 at Bristol. Kyle Larson in other races where he ran into Denny Hamlin under caution. Chase Elliott, Martinsville 2017, getting into Denny Hamlin. We have seen these kind of incidents many times before. Now, if NASCAR is finally going to set their foot down and not allow this to happen going forward, great. If this means that they're going to start sending a message to the drivers about this stuff, that's a good thing. At least they're going to be consistent going forward. But the big problem with NASCAR is they're consistently inconsistent. Like I said, this is not the first time we've seen this. We've seen this kind of stuff before where NASCAR is inconsistent and they don't make the right calls. And right here, right now, they absolutely made the wrong call here. I don't think Bubba Wallace should have been penalized at all. I saw people calling for Bubba to be suspended. I don't understand that. He's in a tight playoff battle. I don't understand penalizing him for running into Bowman. I just don't agree with it. And I would have been also frustrated if Chase got a fine, at least if they were consistently giving $50,000 fines out. At least they were consistent. But I just don't understand how you're going to fine one guy $50,000 for putting another guy in the wall after the race had concluded, but you're not going to penalize the other. I hate the inconsistency. NASCAR needs to get the consistency better going forward, but I'm really worried that they're not going to do that. I don't agree with the call. I don't agree with the decision. I know it's NASCAR's decision, and it's understandable they want to make a decision like this. We made a lot of Bubba Wallace fans mad. I don't understand the call. I think it's a wrong decision in my opinion. I don't think they're going to appeal it. They can just now focus on trying to win the Cup race this Sunday and try to make the playoffs as a whole. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the final major story of today's episode as we're doing a small silly season update. Now, we've already talked about the big story of the week. Noah Gragson, of course, will be joining Farmer Motorsports in 2025. But we now need to kind of talk about the remaining rides that are available. There are 7 current NASCAR Cup Series seats that are not currently filled for 2025. These organizations are the ones that we know that are not making any moves. Alex Bowman is going to stay in the 48 car next year, despite the rumors and rumblings that maybe Alex Bowman was going to lose the seat to Kyle Busch. Those were completely squashed 100% after Alex Bowman won at Chicago, and obviously Alex Bowman has been super consistent. Chase Elliott signed through 2027, Kyle Larson is signed through 2026, and William Byron signed through 2025, but I do think that William Byron is going to get an extension there. Joe Gibbs Racing, they're completely set. Chase Briscoe is going to be the 19 next year, taking over for Mark Truex Jr. Mark Truex Jr. expected to go part-time with 23XI Racing next year, including at the Daytona 500. Denny Hamlin is set through 25, though he could be a free agent at the end of next year. And both Ty Gibbs and Christabel are completely set. Richard Childress Racing, they are going to be a 2-car organization full-time. There was talk that they were looking to have 3 full-time cars for 2025, and Noah Gragson was looking to go there for next year, but Noah Gragson, of course, announcing he's going to front row. That, of course, is not going to be happening. We aren't expecting changes at Legacy Motor Club going into 2025, but we do know that Eric Jones is still not signed for 2025 at this current moment, but we do know that he's probably going to sign an extension. Corey Heim is still in the running for this seat going into next year, but he won't be going anywhere in 2025. They could run a third part-time car for Jimmy Johnson as well, or maybe Sheldon Creed as well at some point, but I don't think that is going to end up happening. Speaking of RCR, like I said, Kyle Busch, he's set through 2025. He could technically be a free agent at the end of the 2025 season, but Kyle Busch is not going anywhere. Austin Dillon confirmed over the weekend that he has 2 more years in the 3. There was talk that Austin Dillon could retire, but Austin Dillon is going to stay in the 3 car in 2025. We also know Josh Ferry will be in the 21 car for the Wood Brothers next year, and we do know that Ricky Stenhouse Jr. will be in the 47, but there will be new ownership coming in there. Maybe Kevin Harvick perhaps could come in there and work on the ownership side of things. This leaves some other teams that are kind of up in the air. First one being 23XI Racing. Let's begin by talking about Bubba Wallace. Bubba Wallace has not signed a contract extension yet with 23XI Racing. However, it is expected at the moment that Bubba Wallace is going to sign a multi-year extension with 23XI Racing. Some are going to question that move, but hear me out. Bubba Wallace, in my opinion, has earned another year in the Cup Series with this team. Bubba's been a playoff threat and contender in every single year he's driven for 23XI Racing, and he also brings a lot of sponsors as well. And I think Bubba, like I said, being a playoff contender, he's having a good statistical season. He actually would be in the 15th in the points right now if he didn't have all the playoff points and all the other things. He's currently 15th in the standings, and I think he's got 6 top 10 so far, which is very close to other drivers in Cup this year. I think Bubba has earned the right to get an extension. I think he will get a 2-year extension with 23XI Racing. I think he gets his contract extension signed here very, very soon. And then 2311 Racing, once again, they are going to have a third full-time entry for 2025. They have purchased one of the Super Haas Racing charters. It just has not been formally announced at this time. Riley Herbst is expected to get the third 2311 Racing seat, despite rumors of Corey Haim maybe getting it as well. It sounds like with the Monster Energy connection, Riley Herbst is likely going to end up getting the third 2311 Racing seat in 2025. As for Trackhouse Racing will have 3 cars in 2025. Ross Chastain, we know, is officially confirmed, while Daniel Suarez has not officially signed a contract extension with Trackhouse at this time. Daniel Suarez will sign a multi-year extension with Trackhouse for 2025. I also think 2026 as well. I think that win that he got at Atlanta really secured that bag and deal. It just hasn't been announced yet, which is a little concerning, but I do think an extension is coming the way of him very, very soon. And now the big question, of course, what happens between the third car. Of course, is between Shane Van Gisbergen and Zane Smith. Well, it's starting to sound like that Shane Van Gisbergen is going to get the third Trackhouse seat for 2025. As much as I think it'd be cool to see Zane Smith in a Trackhouse seat next year, we'll get to him here in just a little bit. Shane Van Gisbergen, I think, has earned the right opportunity to move up to the Cup Series next year. SVG has been a major threat all year long in Xfinity, especially on the road courses. He's the winningest driver in Xfinity this year. He's led in 5 of his first Cup Series starts, of his 6 Cup starts, and he's done an excellent job in bringing sponsorship and funding. And I think you look at what he's been able to do and accomplish. He's extremely popular in the lower series. He's been very popular in every video that I've done on this channel. I think Shane Van Gisbergen will be in Cup. I think Red Bull's going to sponsor. Wendy's is going to sponsor. I think SVG will end up in a Cup Series car with Trackhouse Racing next year. It sounds very likely at this point that he's going to make the move up. I think he's ready to make the jump up. I don't think he needs another year in Xfinity. I think he moves up in 2025. Speaking of RCR, I think Austin Hill, Jesse Love are also probably going to make some select Cup starts next year. And maybe if Will Brown wants to come around and stick around, he can end up doing that. Going back to 2311 Racing, we know they're going to have a 4th car next year for Martin Truex Jr., potentially Corey Haim if Riley gets the 3rd seat. I think if Carlos Carlson could come back, if they wanted to come back. Let's transition talk about Ford. Haas factory team is obviously going to be making the jump next year to Cup. We do know Gene Haas is keeping one of the charters. Cole Custer is the front runner for the NASCAR Cup seat, but Ryan Preece and Harrison Burton, from what I understand, are lead candidates for the Haas factory team, and I also think Haley Deegan is also a candidate for this seat as well. As for front row motorsports, there are 3 drivers in the running for the final front row seat. We know Todd Gillen and Noah Gragson have been officially confirmed. Those 3 drivers are Sam Mayer, Christian Eckes, and Zane Smith, according to Bob Pockers. Sam Mayer's name has been linked. He's been doing a really good job in the NASCAR Xfinity Series this year. I think he's earned the right opportunity to maybe make the move up to Cup. I know some will disagree with that because some have say inexperience, but Sam Mayer's been doing a really excellent job. He's a good road racer. They've got a good road course program. I think he'd be a good candidate. Same with Zane Smith. Zane Smith has been linked to Kaulig Racing. He's been linked to a couple other organizations, but I certainly do believe that Zane Smith would be a great candidate. Plus, of course, he drove for Front Row Motorsports back in the day. It would definitely make a lot of sense for Zane Smith to make the move back up to Cup with this team. And finally, Christian Eckes is the other one. Christian Eckes has been tearing it up in trucks this year. His average finish is really impressive, by the way. Got a 6.8 average finish. I think that Christian Eckes would be a really good candidate for that ride, but also Kaulig Racing is another option. As Bob Pockerson mentioned in the article, he is also linked to the Kaulig Racing organization for 2025. Now we talk about Junior Motorsports. If Sam Mayer moves up to the Cup Series next year, Connor Zilisch is currently rumored to be the lead candidate to take over Sam Mayer's seat. Connor Zilisch, of course, a young racing prodigy who, of course, has won the Rolex 24 in LMP2, the 12-hour Sebring in LMP2 as well. He's been doing a really good job, won a couple ARCA East races and also a couple ARCA races. I think Connor Zilisch has earned the right to move up. He's likely going to move up into the 1 car next year. Junior Motorsports always gets talk about maybe moving up to Cup next year, but that ain't going to be happening from what I understand. They could run part-time. That certainly is a possibility, but I don't know if they're going to do that unless they buy a partnership into another organization. Already mentioned Eric Jones, Corey Haim. Those are the 2 frontrunners for that from that second seat. I don't think that happens going into next year. There's a couple other very interesting things to note. Rico Racing, there's a chance Ryan Preece could go to Rico Racing in 2025, but I don't know if that's going to happen at this point. He could run part-time, same with Harrison Burton. Those could certainly be possibilities for the 2025 calendar year. Kaulig Racing is another one that's very interesting. Sam Mayer has been linked for this team. Christian Eckes has been linked. We know a couple other drivers like AJ Allmendinger could go full-time with this team. We know Zane Smith's in the running for this seat as well. And we do know Daniel Hemrick could be back, but we don't know at this particular point. This silly season is going to be very interesting. There's a couple big teams making big moves, and I think it's very exciting if you're a fan of these organizations. I think there's a lot of movement on the horizon for this silly season especially, and I think a lot of these rides are going to be finalized here very, very soon on where everyone's going to end up going for 2025. So that is good for today's NASCAR news and motorsports news video. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, notifications on, so when you're notified when a video does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support my Patreon as well. Let's go below that and comment your thoughts below on today's video. How do you think Bubba Wallace is going to do next year? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if Shane moves up, how well do you think he's going to run? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Later tonight on the channel, we'll have the NASCAR Truck Series race review if the race does end up happening. Tomorrow, we'll have the Xfinity Series race review, the video talk about the Cup Series qualifying session, and of course, an SVG video dropping. So anyways, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode, and I'll see you guys next time for more great, awesome NASCAR content and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.